Good evening, boys and girls and Midway families. This is Principal Jackson coming to you once again for this week's edition of Tuesday Tale. This is our first reading after the holiday break, and I was so excited to see all of you returning today. Today, I have the privilege of reading for you Ada's Violin, and it is the story of a recycled orchestra of Paraguay. And Paraguay, for those of you who do not know, is a country in Central America. And this story is by Susan Hood. It's illustrated by Sally Wren Comport. Okay, let's read. Ada Rios grew up in a town made of trash. Every morning at dawn, Ada heard the first garbage trucks rumble and roll down the road to Catura. Beep, 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 beep. Backing into the landfill, they tipped their loads up and crash. The trash came tumbling down 1,500 tons each day. Boys and girls, that is a lot of weight. A ton is about 2,000 pounds, 1 ton. And so if you had 1,500 tons, that is a lot of weight. Ada and her friends watched as the grancheros, recyclers, scrambled, tearing into plastic bags with long-handled hooks, pushing aside moldy produce, grabbing anything they could recycle or sell. The going rates, 5 cents for a pound of cardboard, 10 cents for a pound of plastic. The noisy, stinking, sweltering slum was not the most nurturing neighborhood. Ada watched, eyes wide, but didn't say much. And yet she liked to imagine each garbage truck was a box of surprises. One never knew what might be inside. Her father had found appliances, toys, perfumes, and antique watches. One woman even discovered a small box full of jewelry. Little did Ada know there was a bigger surprise waiting for her in the landfill. Every day when Ada's parents went to work, grandmother Miriam cared for Ada and her little sister Noella. Grandmother loved to sing to rock and roll songs from the 1960s. The girls grew up on the tunes of the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, and Creedence Clearwater Revival. Ada loved to sing too, but only when no one was listening. Ada's dad brightened the night with stories and songs of great musicians. He turned up the radio and pointed out the sounds of each instrument made. Ada heard one above all others. Zing went the strings on the violin. When the girls started school, grandmother returned to work as a recycler, collecting bottles and cans in the city. Classes let out at noon. Young Ada was in charge of Noelia upon her parents who were done with work. At first, the girls stayed close to home, playing with Grandma Miriam's doggies and making sand cakes in the dirt. Soon they joined their cousins, playing hide and seek or a game of handball in the streets. In time, they ventured farther afield, walking down the bodega to get candy. Boys and girls, a bodega is a Spanish word for a small store. But Ada noticed the teenagers hanging out in the alleys, grumbling about life in the landfill looming ahead. What would happen to him, to her, to her little sisters? She watched as the older kids turned to gangs and got into fights. One day, when Ada was 11 years old, her grandmother saw a sign posted on the wall of the chapel. Violin, guitar, cello taught Saturdays at 8 a.m. Fabio Chavez. How grandmother had longed to learn music. Too late for her, maybe, she thought, but not for her granddaughters. She signed them up without asking, and their parents. Ada's heart sang out. Thanks to her abuela, abuela, boys and girls, is the Spanish word for grandma. She could leave her worries behind and learn to play. At the first class, the teacher, Fabio Chavez, had 3 guitars and 2 violins to share. Ada chose a violin right away, but 10 children had signed up. Frustrated, Ada and her friends found that there were not enough instruments to go around. And there was a bigger problem. Everyone quickly realized that the children would need to practice at home, but it wasn't safe to be with an expensive instrument in Catura, where the violin is worth more than a house. Watching the children play amid broken glass and rusty metal, Senor Chavez knew he had to do something. He remembered a band called Les Luthieres that made its own instrument. That was it. He asked Nicolas Cola Gomez, a ganchero and a carpenter, for help. Senor Gomez found a discarded drum with a big hole in it. What could he use to fix it? He picked through the trash and discovered an old X-ray film. What? Would that work? It did. Senor Gomez kept experimenting with others, like Tito Romero helped. Inventing instruments wasn't easy, but they fiddled around, discovering which materials hit just the right notes. They transformed old oil drums into cellos, water pipes into flutes, and packing crates into guitars. Soon, there were enough instruments for all of the children who wanted to play. Ada chose the violin made from old paint can, an aluminum baking tray, a fork, and a pieces of wooden crate. Worthless to thieves, it was valuable to her. It was a violin of her very own. Senor Chavez set the strict schedule of 3-hour lessons. The class had no classroom, so they played outside, despite the 100-degree heat and sudden downpours. At first, Ada and the others struggled. Sharps and flats clanged and clashed. Playing an instrument is a process. It doesn't matter if one is rich or poor, ugly, fat, thin. You cannot learn to play an instrument overnight. Senor Chavez told the children. Some kids decided it was too much work and gave up, but not Ada. After the lesson, she would practice at home, sometimes 2 hours a day. In time stretches, twangs and tweets hit the right notes. Their class became a small island where Chavez taught them to respect themselves and one another. Be kind. Always say please and thank you. Say you're sorry. Be dedicated when you can commit to something. Senor Chavez told the children. Soon the ragtag crew of kids learned to tune in, to listen to one another, to band together. The recycled orchestra was born. From then on, there was something new in the air in Catura. The gancheros trudging home from the landfill might lift their heads to hear the sounds of Ada's violin and the strain of Bibi's cello and the strum of Noelia's guitar. A symphony of sound helped to lift them beyond the heat, the stench, and their aching back. With her violin, Ada could close her eyes and imagine a different life. She could soar on the high, bright, bittersweet notes to a place far away. She could be who she was meant to be. As Ada's skill grew, so did her confidence. Once timid, she took center stage playing solos. She helped teach the younger children too. Her teachers and fellow students took note. When she was 12 years old, Ada was named a first violinist. Imagine, she was first at something. Shortly after, she and her 39 fellow musicians were invited to perform concerts in Catura and later in the nearby capital city of Anunciación. Word of this extraordinary orchestra spread. Soon they were asked to perform in other cities and even other countries. Ada and her friends flew on their first airplane, stayed in their first hotel, swam in the bright blue waters of Rio de Janeiro, sampled their first pastries and pineapple, and saw sights they never imagined. The world dazzled them, just as they dazzled the world. When Ada was 16, the orchestra received a very special invitation. They were asked to tour with a famous rock band. More than 35,000 people awaited them at their first concert in Bogota, Colombia. Ada was more than nervous. She didn't know how to enter or how to greet the audience. She went blank. She saw a giant stage with glaring lights and heard people screaming. But she didn't worry. As the recycled orchestra took the stage, the people who had paid to see the rock band cheered for them. The enormous audience sang and swayed to the music as the orchestra played, and their performance came to a close. A crescendo of cheers, chants, and applause resounded across the park. The astonished kids bowed, grinning at one another. They had discovered the surprise waiting in the landfill. Buried in the trash was music, and buried in themselves was something to be proud of. The end, okay? So boys and girls, as we were able to see with this story, this group of children who lived in this city, they were able to make their own instruments out of recycled trash. That is something very special. So I have a few questions for you today. I want you to answer in the comment section, either on Dojo, Facebook, or YouTube, okay? What is the Spanish word for grandmother used in this text? Second question, what is the Spanish word used for small store in this text? Okay. Last question, what was the name of Ada's first violin teacher? What was the name of Ada's first violin teacher? All right, boys and girls, thank you for tuning in tonight. The first 3 people to answer these 3 questions, I have a special surprise for you tomorrow morning. Thank you, boys and girls. Remember, as always, boys and girls, Midway matters. Good night.